No. Ah, that time of the week again. Alrighty. Let's go. G'day, I'm James from Zalgariath Gaming, and this is Spell Focus, where we cast an arcane eye over a D&D 5e spell and see if it's interesting enough to keep you awake at night. The level 1 enchantment spell, Sleep, is one of those that everyone wants to use and seems like a great idea, but in the 2014 rules, after about level 2, usually it was the caster that fell flat as opposed to its targets. Mechanically, it has been completely overhauled in the new rules, so let's see if this classic crowd controller is still a snooze fest, or if the fantasy that is a good night's rest has finally come true. Also, don't forget to grab your dice and ZG character sheet so you can play along with the micro-adventure at the end of this video. Both versions of the Sleep spell are single actions to cast, available to bards, sorcerers, and wizards, and a few subclasses like the Archfey Warlock and the Twilight Domain Cleric. The goal of the spell is to knock foes unconscious, but how it goes about that in 2014 is very different to the 2024 Player's Handbook version. The older version had a great range of 90 feet, and it affected every creature in an impressive 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point you could see. Most impressively, while the duration of 1 minute is standard, it did not require concentration. That actually sounds pretty wonderful. So what was the main issue that led to its complete rewrite? Well, that comes from the unique way the spell selected its targets. Here's how it worked. Cast at level 1, you rolled 5d8 to see how many hit points worth of creatures it could affect. For the record, that's an average of only 22.5. Starting with the creatures in the area with the lowest current hit points, you put them into sleep, giving them the unconscious condition, which is very, very nasty. Until the spell ends, they take damage, or someone used an action to shake or slap them awake. Keep in mind, they kept the slap part out of the new rules. Don't know why, just another thing they did. On my table, you can still slap away. It's gonna work. You then had to subtract that creature's current HP from your total dice pool and move on to the next lowest, and so on until you hit a creature who had more HP than the dice number you had remaining. That's a little bit tricky and tedious. Importantly, undead elves and creatures immune to the charmed condition were totally unaffected by the spell. Upcasting was possible, adding 2d8 for an average of 9 more HP per level above the first. This made Sleep an absolute beast of a spell with no saving throw at lower levels for shutting down large groups of weak enemies like goblins or kobolds. But it fell off hard against tougher foes as you leveled up. Even cast as a 6th level spell, an average of only 68 HP, when you could cast Disintegrate for an average of 75 damage, is just not there anymore. So it disappeared very quickly off most casters' prepared lists. Now, shifting to the 2024 Player's Handbook version, the first thing we see is the impressive range and area effect both get nerfed. Range drops from 90 to 60, and the area of effect damage, instead of being a rather large 20-foot radius, is now only 5. Next, it looks even more dire, as while the duration of the spell is still a minute, it now requires concentration, the lack of which was one of the biggest selling points of this spell in the older version. But, and it is a hill giant sized but, the way it targets spells is much simpler and much better in the new rules. Firstly, you get to choose who is affected, so allies are no longer a risk. We'll talk about that in a second. Then each targeted creature makes a wisdom saving throw, becoming incapacitated until the end of its next turn, when it has to repeat that save, and if it fails a second time, falls unconscious for the duration. Unless it takes damage, you lose concentration, or again, it gets slapped. The immunity exception change is interesting too. Creatures that don't sleep, like elves, are still immune, but instead of just listing undead, it now says creatures who are immune to the exhaustion condition automatically succeed on their saves. FYI, the vast majority, if not all undead, are immune to said condition, but that also now includes a lot of other beasties too. And you could argue it says creatures that don't normally sleep, so at your DM's discretion, it may say a golem or something else along those lines, even if it does not specifically highlight the exhausted condition, is immune to the spell. That's a little bit of Mother May I, and not very well worded in my opinion. However, the thing that set Reddit afire most at the time of the change was the removal of the ability to upcast. There simply isn't one in the new version of the spell, and that is wrong. But don't worry, I've got a homebrew fix for that at the end of the video. So is it better or worse? Well, 2014 Sleep was all about that burst potential. No saves involved, just a flat HP threshold that let you auto-knock-out low-level HP critters without them getting a chance to resist. Kinda bonkers. It was incredibly strong in the early game encounters, often ending fights before they started, but it became scaled very poorly when you got to higher level enemies who had way more HP, and with such a large blast radius, you couldn't easily target selectively due to the lowest first rule. Even a goblin boss with only 21 HP needed a better than average roll to knock out, and that was if it didn't have an ally near them who'd sap that HP pool faster than a warlock accepting the offer of a short rest. Not to mention that if you had a weakened ally in the fray, even if you had cleverly whittled down your main target to a low enough HP balance to be affected, chances are your frontline fighters might get hit first, actually protecting enemies, which would just be very frustrating. So while the area of effect was bigger and the no concentration meant you could layer it with other spells easily, as soon as you started facing opponents above about CR1, 2014 Sleep just became a poor, overly complex option compared to other spells at your disposal. By contrast, 2024 version feels more balanced and tactical, introducing the Wisdom save, though granted needing to fail twice to get the full effect, means all creatures now have a chance to resist it, but it means that all creatures of your choice now have a chance to fail. No more leaving it up to chance of a HP pool and the current health of potentially a dozen targets in the blast radius, including your friends by the way, who you can now ignore. This was then followed by tedious maths and worrying about before you see the critter you actually want lie down being affected that the others would suck up that HP. The small blast of 5, while looking crap on paper, actually means that you get more control over choosing these targets, and the incapacitated step before unconscious is still very nasty, robbing it of any actions and breaking enemy casters' concentrations for one turn on the first fail. That's not bad. But requiring your concentration for the full minute is a big downside, as it now competes with other higher level spells, and the range nerf to 60 feet also kinda sucks, making your positioning a bit trickier. So it becomes a choose your poison situation. Overall, it is less of a quick win button at level 1, as you can't just knock out a small room of kobolds, but it improves its usefulness for crowd control in mid-tier play and beyond, keeping its relevance for much longer, and nasty little surprise for those tightly packed low wisdom foes that you would just like to take a nap. Now don't get me wrong, as a father to a toddler who has approximately 2 HP but makes wisdom stubbornness rolls at advantage with a +5 modifier, the old version would be high on my personal wish list just below prestidigitation for the real world. But there's just one more little kicker which is going to tip it over the line to being a slight improvement on the old version, and that is it's a level 1 spell that has a chance to burn a legendary resistance, because being incapacitated for a turn as a big boss is a bad thing, and one bad roll, one level 1 spell, one legendary resistance burnt is a big win for the players regardless of what happens. Plus you might get a few of their minions in 5 feet in the blast radius as well. That's pretty much the saving grace. It's not a big one, but it's something meaning that 2024 is going to be my pick of the two. So if you'd like your enemies to take a little bit of nap time, then head over to my Patreon where you can get for free copies of both versions of the spells in spell card form, which are accompanied by the appropriate size templates for each version to use in your games. In even better news, if you're playing the Archfey Warlock who gets really ripped off by having no ability to upcast, or quite frankly, anyone who would like to be able to upcast this spell, I will have a homebrew version available to my members, which addresses this problem and takes sleep back to the next level. Literally. Not a new idea by any means, but I think increasing the radius is the most logical choice here. It would be rather OP to go 5 foot per level, I think. That gets out to blasty huge ranges and interferes with other spells like Hypnotic Pattern that do similar things. But if we halve that down and go to 10 feet at level 3, 15 at level 5, 20 at level 7 and a nice big jump to 30 at 9th level, and I think this gives Sleep the extra Z's it needs to move it from being a quirky option when you're running low on spell slots to a powerful enchantment your DM will have nightmares about. Now grab your dice, it's time for the next micro-adventure in Rumming on Empty. The next day, Blowy is reserved after he contemplates the outcome of yesterday's trial. We can talk more about that later, mate. Right now, my rum skin's nearly dry and we're only a ferry ride across the harbour away from old Timo. Can't wait to get me to the Artificers College and find me that unlimited rum. Before we pop off, I've got some unfinished business to attend to if you don't mind. See if you can find us a lift across the water. Watercraft of all shapes and sizes ply the straits of the Great Harbour. The large passenger ferry is in dock and will leave within the hour, but there are many other options on hand. Give me a wisdom perception or an intelligence investigation check to see what options you have available. Blowy gives a cursory look before he heads off with a roll of... Crit! First one of the campaign. Looks like your job just got a lot easier.